Yeah, it's scary.
With a Roger Reader on that.
I'm sorry?
Really, really good.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. Thank you. Okay. Remember, because of this, I will probably be repeating some of the things you say for the sake of the camera. But as we get started in Revelation Part 2, the first week was a lot of review. I hope you were able to even maybe sight unseen answer some of the questions. If not, because sometimes it's a good exercise, or sometimes what I would do is write it down and then go back and make sure I was right. Go look up my answers. The point of an overview is always to fly at so many 10,000, 20,000 feet. In other words, you're just getting the lay of the land. We're not looking at tremendous detail. But today what we're going to do is go through these first, 11 chapters and look at what we see each chapter being about. Surface level, great things to fill in. So if you want to get out your at-a-glance chart, have your observation worksheets handy or your Bible open. We're going to not go line by line at this point in most of the chapters because, again, we're not looking at detail. But as you're flipping and as you're finding, we can talk about a few things that we talked about in Part 1 that were part of your discussion this week. How did we come about this information? Who wrote it down? Where did it come from?
John wrote it down.
Okay, John wrote it down.
John.
So John is the author. Now we know God is the ultimate author, but when we're talking about this is the human that God used. Okay, John. Very briefly, give me a little bit of information about which John are we talking about?
The Apostle John.
John the Apostle. Sometimes he's called John the Revelator because of this book, but we know him as John the Apostle. John the Apostle of Jesus Christ. Okay, a beloved disciple. He wrote what other books? John. First, second, and third John, and Revelation. Okay, so that is this John, and it's important because John is a common name today, but it was a common name even then. And we have John the Baptist that we never want to make sure, we want to make sure we always, they're important people, but they're not the same person. John was the beloved disciple of Jesus, the one who leaned against Jesus' breast while they ate, very close. The inner circle of three, which is Peter, James, and John. James being John's brother, the sons of thunder, if you remember. They were called the sons of thunder. So that is this John.
They're the sons of Zebedee.
Yes, their father was Zebedee.
Yeah.
Yes, they're sons of Zebedee. So that is this John. He was chosen to write it down. Where was John when this happened? Isle of Patmos. Why was he there? He was in prison
because of Jesus Christ.
Right, the gospel of Jesus Christ, or his stance with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yes, that's why he was there. So this was not a vacation. This was a really bad place. And extra biblical information give us that this was a very bad time for John and things that might have happened to him. So how did it come to John? What was the path? What was the way?
From God.
Okay, so from God the Father
To Jesus.
to the Son, Jesus,
To his angel.
to his angel,
To John.
okay, to John, and ultimately from John to who?
To us.
Okay, to us, what are we called?
Bondservants.
To bondservants, right, and that is right. Ultimately, it gets to us because we're part of those bondservants. And specifically, who was he writing to in chapters 2 and 3? The 7 churches. Okay. As he wrote this. Okay. So this is to those who are believers of Christ. We're the bondservants. And so while that was people of the day, it also ultimately comes down to us. We need to keep remembering this because I did, and I've had others say that they've been told or thought it was like, why do we study this book? Why is this important? It's in the Bible. I mean, that's an easy answer. But this particular revelation was sent through John, through this path, to the bondservants. There's some reason that God wants us to study this. And some of you may have been scared off of it in the past, either on your own or through things that people have said. So it's important to remember, this is not a book to skip over. And as you know, we're going deep. We're going to be digging for a while, which is really good. Okay, now what was the purpose given for John to write this down? Why did Jesus want him to know this?
To show the things which will soon take place.
Yes, so that's the purpose, to show the things, and actually, yes, that's the things. Yes, Sandy is saying verse 19. But the purpose is to show the things which shortly must take place. Also, we're told that there is something attached to reading, hearing, and heeding this. And what is that? Blessing, yeah. So there's a blessing that's going to come if we read, hear, and heed. Got to remember the heed part. And again, that's written to bondservants. So we're to heed this. Okay, but as Sandy's pointing out, there is a specific thing in Revelation 1:19. And what is that? Yes. So there's three parts that we're told. And then the first is, write therefore the things which you have seen, the things which are, and the things which shall take place after these things. Okay, so as you did in Revelation part 1, and if you were joining us, and we will have one joining us for this part, or two, you will see that you are, those are what we call segment divisions. For if you look at the entire book, which includes all 22 chapters, the book is divided into those three parts John's told to write down. Because he's going to write down the rest, right? He's going to write it all down. All right. So we're going to look today at what this entire book is about. We established this last time. You should have established it this time. What would you say is the theme of all of the book of Revelation? If you were going to write a title for the book. I just kind of gave it to you. The Revelation of Jesus Christ. The Revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay.
Duh.
Yeah, really. Sometimes it's just as literal as it can get. Right? The revelation of Jesus Christ is what this, and there may be, subtitles or other things, but that is like the main thing. Okay, but now we're also going to look at each chapter's themes. So if you want to number down through 11. Again, we're flying high, we're flying fast, so we're going to try to keep this intact. Okay, so as we look at the overall theme, notice that each one of our titles for a chapter needs to uphold that theme. And let me give you an example. If we decided in chapter 2 that the title of, or the chapter theme for chapter 2 was something like, what was the name of a church, or why they named it that, or what did they grow in their backyards? That's not really the revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay, so we want each one of those chapter titles to support our overall thing. If you're ever doing this on your own with another book, and you're going through this overview process on your own, and you choose a title of a book, and then you start looking at each individual chapter title and start realizing they're not supporting your overall theme, then maybe your overall theme needs to be adjusted. So they should work together. Okay? Be like you're outlining, essentially. Okay? So you're outlining in reverse. Instead of outlining and then filling in, you're actually looking at and then making an outline from it, like you might have done in your early elementary or middle school days. Yeah, taking you back a little bit. Okay, so chapter 1 is about what? Again, yeah, it's really going to fit, right? So this is
Description of Jesus.
right, a revelation in this case, or even a description. I like that. Description of Jesus. Okay, Jesus is the main thing, not the only thing, but the main thing that's revealed in chapter 1. Okay. When we move to chapters 2 and 3, what do we find? Because they're similar. What do messages to the churches. So in chapter 2 you've got the messages, and in chapter 3 you've got the messages, and you can list those churches. There's 4 in the first one, and there's 3 in the second one. Okay, these churches are found where? Asia Minor, and we're told that in chapter 1. So if we didn't have a map, we're told that. Okay, and then starting in chapter 4. And I'm really going through those first 3 fast because we covered them a lot in the first part. So I don't think that we have any problems or disputes there. But now we're coming into we've looked at this a little bit, but we're now coming into some newer parts of Revelation. This is where our focus is going to be in part 2 and on. Okay? And I'm going to remind you, in this particular part of Revelation, part 2, meaning that, We will not be using commentaries. So do not go to your commentaries. I think maybe the last lesson or two you might be released, but do not go to your commentaries. There's a reason for this. The reason is that we really want to just see what Revelation says. We're going to do a lot of timelining over time, which hopefully will help you visually remember things too. Okay, so in John chapter 4, how does it open up? After these things. That is a key phrase. Always remember, mark it. I happen to not highlight it, but with my pencil, mark it in green, and then I put a black arrow from after to things, just saying after these things. And then it says, after these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard like the sound of a trumpet. And where did he hear that voice?
In chapter 1.
Chapter 1, right. So when he said I had heard, he's talking about the voice he had heard in chapter 1. And who was that voice? In chapter 1, Jesus. Okay, so this is the same voice. Okay, so he's saying, I heard Jesus. And the voice said, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things. Okay, now let's stop for just a second. We have our segment divisions.
Yes.
We have the things which he had seen. Where is that covered?
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Okay, so if you're doing your segment divisions on the side, you would have the things, you have to write it out, but the things which he had seen, okay? And I would write it out. Now you've got a little more space than me. That's on the side in your at-a-glance chart. You can write it sideways too. I just can't turn myself that much. Okay. Then we have the next segment division, which the things which are. What is the covered? Where is that covered? 2 and 3. So these are the things which are. Okay. So now we've got this first verse in chapter 4, and it tells us that now we're starting into the part which is what part? The things that are, after these things. Okay. So if those were your segment divisions, and it would cover on past 11. So everything from chapters 4 to 22 will cover the things that will take place after these things. Okay, it's really clear in chapter 4, verse 1, but as you looked at the other chapters, you will see that. Okay, so the other thing I want you to always look for when you're looking at Revelation, and Kay will direct you in this, but I'm going to even tell you now, is where are things taking place? Okay, so some of that is where is John, or where is the action taking place? Okay, that might not make a whole lot of sense to you right now, but always think of that, especially when we start, I think in week 3, we'll start picturing Revelation. You're going to be looking at things and you're going to be thinking about things, and you need to ask yourself that question. And it's not, a lot of times it's clear. And you'll go, oh, that was pretty simple. Other times you're going, I'm not sure. And remember, being not sure is okay. Ask the Holy Spirit, and if you're still not sure by the time you're finished, come in and hopefully we will see it together. All right? And then again, if at the end of that it's still obscure to you, that's okay. God will reveal it to you if it's needed to be revealed, or some things are going to stay obscure until they happen. You're going to find that in Revelation. We might understand what it says, but we have no idea what that's going to look like when it happens. It's going to be one of those things that, as well as you know this, when you know this well, when the events happen, you're going to go, oh, that's how it's all going to happen. Okay. I hope if that's the way it's going to be. But he has this voice that's linked back to chapter 1, which is Jesus saying, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things. I'm going to emphasize this over and over. Who is talking here? Jesus. Who has said he is going to show these things to John? Jesus. It's really important to understand who kind of is responsible here. And then it says, John says, immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne standing in heaven, and one sitting on the throne. Now, he's in the Spirit, whatever that means. We're not going to get to that right now. We'll hopefully look at that later. But where is he looking? Heaven. Okay. So what he's seeing is in heaven. Okay? And then it says, and goes on and gives a description of he who was sitting like a jasper stone and sardius in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne like an emerald in appearance, and around the throne were 24 thrones, and upon the thrones were 24 elders sitting and clothed in white garments, and it goes on. So as you looked at chapter 4, how would you title it? What's going on here? Okay, I heard a lot, but I didn't hear anything distinct. I'm glad you're answering. So, Sandy, you were the first one I heard, so what were you saying?
I was just saying things that are to come.
Okay. He's beginning to see things that are to come. Okay, what else? Description of heaven. Okay, Sandy, did you use
That's what I said, yeah.
description of heaven? Debbie, did you say something? Similar? Okay, and Donna, you were saying something too. Similar? Okay. So as we put our ideas together, we see he's describing what he saw in heaven, right? So I have a little more, I've said John sees the throne of God in heaven, the creatures and the elders worshiping. You don't have to be quite that detailed. We'll just put up like what you're saying is, I'm going to say John describes even, heaven. What he sees in heaven, you can write out as much as you want. Just so, the reason for this is at a glance. In other words, you go to that chart, you look at that chapter title, and you're going to remember what happened in that chapter. That's a little bit of why I put a little more detail in mine, because I want to remember that's where we saw the 24 elders worshiping and the living creatures, because they're described as well. The first creature was like a lion, the second creature like a calf, the third creature like the face of a man. And if you know hymnal, in your hymnal, usually hymn number 1, Holy, Holy, Holy. Where did we get it? Holy, 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 the Lord God Almighty. I love it when the hymns, match the scripture, and of course whoever wrote it, you might know, got it from here. And you see that emphasis. And just understand that's what's going on in heaven when John saw it. That's what's going on in heaven. So when somebody says you can't know what's going on in heaven, you can take them to some of these verses. We don't know everything, but we know this. This is revealed to John by Jesus Christ himself, and John sees it. Understand that. He's seeing this, and he's writing it down. Okay? So, that's chapter 4. As we move on to chapter 5, what did you see going on in chapter 5? Where is John again? Or where is the action taking place? Still in heaven. It's continuation of what he's seeing in 4, right? Okay. And what else? What specifically?
There's a book and the seals.
There's a book. That's significant, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And there's seals.
7 seals.
That's significant. And what else is significant about the book and its seals? No one on earth, nobody born, can open it except the Lamb. Okay, and we hear a little bit about this lamb. It's not just a lamb, right?
No.
Not just a little sheep.
The lamb.
It's the Lamb of God, right? And Sandy, what were you saying?
One slain.
Yes, he's standing as if slain. Okay, so you have a description of him. He's from the tribe of Judah, from the root of David, and he has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals. Okay, we're getting an idea of who this might be, and it says he came and took it out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. He who sat on the throne was described in chapter 4, right? The sardius and appearance and the rainbow and all of that. And so the Lamb comes in and he takes it out of the right hand. There's a lot of significance, and we'll look at that when we get into the chapter study, which we're not there yet. But this is the Lamb. So we have in chapter 5 the Lamb, who, what does it say of him in regards to the book?
He's worthy.
Okay, the Lamb is worthy to open the book and its seals, because you really want to remember the seals are spoken of. They're pointed out. Okay. Now remember, the terminology in our Bibles and our translations is book. The literal translation would have been scroll. So you can imagine something that's rolled up. and it's got these seals. And it says it was written on the inside and the outside, so John can see that it's got writing on it. And what is John's reaction? You'll look at this closer later, but what was John's reaction? He wept. Yeah. So there's something going on here. He understands as his vision, as this revelation is being given to him, as he's seeing this happen, he recognizes something extremely significant about this book. This is big, When we read it, we're just wondering, what's in it? Why would John have that? But because he's in the Spirit, God is revealing this. He has this understanding.
I think it was interesting though that he began to weep because he realized there wasn't anyone worthy to open it.
Yes. I think that's part of the significance. Absolutely. And again, I I know we'll study that further as we get in, but it's not bad to just like all this, be seeing these reactions. Okay, and realizing John is not just asleep possibly, what's going on here? He is reacting and he's interacting because he's speaking and people are speaking back to him. This is more than just a movie being played out in front of him. Understand that. Even though, I don't know about you, I cry at movies too. I watched Unbroken last Sunday and there was a point I was boo-hooing. And Roger said later, you about lost it. I said, I did lose it. I reacted. Even when Kay's talking, sometimes I'll answer her. But John is actually having people answer him back. There's an interaction going on here. Okay, so there's a lot in this chapter that we could write down. These are some of the main significant events. Okay. And also, at this point, remember, if this is not exactly what you wrote down, don't necessarily erase what you wrote down. You can write this alongside it, however you want to do that. Again, unless you wrote something really strange down here, like chapter 5 comes after 4, that's not the thing. I hate to ever say you're wrong, but that, I would say, is a correct answer, but wrong. Anyway, and so now as we move into chapter 6, where, what, when, where, why, how, all of those questions. Still, it's a continuation, right? We're not moving away from this scenario that's going on. So, where is he? At heaven. The events are happening in heaven. Yes. And again, it's a continuation. So, as the book has been introduced, as the Lamb has come on the scene, as these seals have been told to us, what do we start happening in 6? The opening of the breaking of these seals, right? So, how many seals are broken in this? 6 of the.
And it's the 6th chapter.
And it's the 6th chapter. That's a great way to remember this. 6 seals broken in chapter 6. That'll help you remember. That means the seals were introduced. The book was introduced in 5. Okay. It's nice to have these little things to remember. Who is breaking the seals? The Lamb. Remember that. It's so important. Who is responsible for all of this? Who's bringing this about? This is a direct action by the Lamb. Okay, so the Lamb breaks the 6 seals. Okay, so you can put that as your title. And if you want to put like it's 7 seals up there, if you want to remember there's 7 seals, but you can just put 6 if you want. Just put it seals. What happens when the 6th seal is broken? There's a significant time phrase given in the 6th seal. It's the last verse. The great day of their wrath has come. Okay? So, what happens in the 6th seal, if you want to add it, is the great day of their wrath has come. Okay? Who would there be?
Human race, humankind.
It'd be who it's impacting, but whose wrath is it?
Oh, God's wrath.
Yes, it's Father and Son, at least. Father, Son, and the Spirit. So the great day. Remember, it's always interesting when God is referred to with a plural pronoun. Okay?
We need to capitalize it.
I agree, it's not capitalized. It needs to. But it could be, therefore, I marked it as God with the Trinity. But like Sandy was saying, it might be the wrath that's coming to people. So that might be why it's not capitalized. But I don't know that they capitalize the theirs. I don't know, I have to go look at that. The Bible usually does. But, so, again, that's a good question, and I don't think we're wrong if we look at it either way. The wrath is coming on them, or where's the source of the wrath? But understand, God does have wrath. He shows wrath, He holds wrath, He has wrath, anger, wrath, many things. It's not the way most people want to view God. And remember, who is breaking the seals? Jesus, the Lamb, right. It's the Lamb, and we know that's Jesus. It's always important to remember that too. But people don't want to portray Jesus as having wrath. And He does. It's part of the nature of God. Okay. Now, in chapter 7, we're moving forward, and we have, what do we see here?
After this.
Okay, after this. So John has seen some stuff now. After he saw those things, we've got a little bit of a shift here. So we need to ask ourselves, who are we seeing here? What's going on here? What do you see in chapter 7? Okay, after the 6 seals broken, after this beginning of the great wrath, the great day of their wrath has come, we see 4 angels standing in the 4 corners of the earth. I always think this is an interesting statement because we know the earth is round. But if you think of the 4 corners of the earth, what do you think of?
North, south, east, west.
The directions, north, south, east, and west. And orienting, as we've talked about many times in other studies, what is the center or the beginning of direction?
East.
Where does God's eye go?
Jerusalem.
Or Jerusalem. So I would say, slightly hesitantly, that if we went from Jerusalem, then it's north of Jerusalem. South, or Israel, I should say. North of Israel, south of Israel, east of Israel, west of Israel. Okay? That might be what it's saying here. Regardless, it's saying the 4 current. In other words, from all points as far away to here, to this place. I saw the 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind should blow on the earth, or on the sea, or on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God, and it cried out with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea. So what's going on with these angels? What is their purpose?
Harm, destruction.
To harm the earth and the sea. But they're not doing it yet. They're holding things back. They're in their places. They haven't come yet. And then it says, saying, don't harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed. How many? Okay, so here we see the 144,000 sealed. And you could say on their foreheads if you want to put that extra information. But they're sealed. And where are these 144,000 coming from? Israel, the people of Israel, not necessarily the land of Israel. The Jews, we would call them, right? From the 12 tribes. Okay, if you list those 12, or it is listed here, the 12 tribes. There are 12,000 coming from Reuben, etc., Manasseh, and all that. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of a hint and exercise when you get to this part. Go and find in the Old Testament, and I can give you some references, where the tribes are listed and compare the list. Okay? Because it's interesting to see the list compared. But as you look at that, there are 12,000 from 12 different tribes. That adds up, or multiplies out, to 144,000. Okay. Would you be one of these?
No.
I have no idea of Jewish descent. Okay, of me. You may be. I'm not going to say you couldn't be. But this is not Gentiles, as we call them, being sealed. Okay? Understand that this is the number the Jehovah's Witnesses use.
Yes.
So if you ever have the opportunity to speak to a Jehovah's Witness, the individual person doesn't know if they're part of the 144,000. They may even say to you, they won't know until they get there. But ask them if they have the credentials to be a Jew. of literally.
100% Jewish, not part Jewish.
I wonder about that too, if there's no,
Yeah.
right, they're 100% Jews, there's no.
Somebody like Scotland.
That's our life music, right?
Yeah.
You always have to have that background song,
Yeah.
right? But right, Sandy is saying that they would need to be able to trace it 100% back to one of these tribes that are mentioned. And I doubt many of the Jehovah's Witnesses can say that. I'm just saying, I'm qualifying it. If you have that, then you could be in one of these lists. I don't know that I have that at all. I have no idea that I have any trace of, but these are people born of Jacob, from the 12 tribes that came of Jacob. That's how literal this
But
is.
there's only 12,000 from each tribe.
Right.
That's interesting.
And that's at this time. Whenever this event occurs, and John is seeing it, but it hasn't occurred yet, but he's seeing this, okay? I shouldn't have probably said that statement I said before that. But anyway, he is seeing this. This is what happens in chapter 7. 144,000 are sealed, okay? Now, one of the helps for me, like Carolyn was saying, chapter 6 is about the 6 seals. Chapter 7 divides into 14. Twice, right. But 7 divides into 14. It's easy kind of for me to remember in chapter 7 are the 144,000. It's just a visual reminder for me, or something in my math head happens to work. But there's another group mentioned in this chapter. After the 144,000. The great multitude. Okay, so you've got the 144,000 and the great multitude are also talked about. Okay, how are the great multitude described?
Every nation, tribe, and king.
Yes, you can't count them. It doesn't give a number like it just did. That's significant. I mean, do you think God could know the number? God will know the number. But it's just saying there's so many, they can't even be counted. So it's much more than 144,000. And as Sandy's already saying, they come out of every nation, every tribe, every people, every tongue. Notice it doesn't say skin color. It doesn't say race. That's what we would say. That's not how God views people.
No.
Okay, there's one race, and it's called the human race. God sees them as peoples or tongues. In other words, they speak a certain language. And he brought all of that about too. He brought the divisions. He sets their boundaries. He increases or lowers their boundaries. God's in charge of all this. But he does describe them. It's a way for us to know, because it's nations also, this is every person on the face of the earth. This is not necessarily, but it's from every place on the face of the earth. It's not every person. I'm sorry about that. In other words, there's no limit by race. There's no, that we would say, there's no limit by what language you speak. We can't leave out a people group because we don't like what they look like.
Right.
God doesn't leave them out. Okay, but from all of that, not everyone, but from all of that is this great multitude. Okay, so now we know where it comes from, but how else are they described? How do they become part of the great multitude?
Because of waving palm branches.
Okay, well, what they're doing is they're clothed in white robes and they've got palm branches in their hands, and they cry out with a loud voice saying it says salvation to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels who were standing around the throne and the elders and the 4 living creatures, they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God. And then it says what they speak. It says they are before, and I'm skipping to verse 15. For this reason, this is the great multitude, were before the throne of God, and they served him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne shall spread his tabernacle over them. But in verse 14 it says, they are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and they've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So the great multitude comes out of the great tribulation. And I know you've heard of the tribulation. You're not, unless you haven't lived, you've heard of the tribulation. Okay, this is the first mention in the book of Revelation of it. We haven't defined it yet, but here it is. So just keep it in mind. This great multitude that John is seeing comes out of the great tribulation. Now, here's a good point about the book of Revelation that we're going to try to see as you look, especially as you do your picturing and all, is that you see that there are things that John's going to see that aren't necessarily within the sequence of events as he's going to lay them out. Sometimes he sees big picture things and then little details. And I'm just going to, in Genesis chapter 1, you see the laying out of the days of creation, right? In Genesis chapter 2, you don't see another day of creation. You see the day or the event of humans being created kind of spelled out better, given more details. Okay, so chapter 2 isn't a ninth day of creation or whatever day of creation. It's an explanation of sixth day of creation, where humans are created, or how God did it. Okay, similar to that, in the book of Revelation, you'll see big categories of events really fastly, you're told in fast order, and then later those events are going to happen. Okay, trust me on that for now. I hope you'll see it for yourself later. Okay, I don't want to preempt too much, but they talk about there's this worship in heaven, if you want to put that back down, and who all's participating in this, and they're clothed in white robes. And he asked the question, or one of the elders answered him, saying, "These are those," verse 13, "who clothed in white robes. Who are they, and from where have they come?" And John said, "My Lord, you know." And he said, "These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation, and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, they're before the throne of God." Okay? So one thing you can know here is there is a great tribulation. You've probably heard a little bit about it. We're going to know more about it later. Okay? There is a great tribulation. There is a great multitude that comes out of that great tribulation. They're standing before the throne. Where is this throne? In heaven. They're dressed in white robes. They have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb, and they are worshiping God there. So you can know a lot about this group, right? This is not just some whatever. And they come from every part of the world. So in this chapter, you see Jew and Gentile, specifically. Okay? So even in this great multitude, you might have those from the tribe of Judah, or the tribe of whatever, because they come out of every people group. But this 144,000 is sealed. Okay, easier. It helps me to remember. 7 goes into 14. It's not a perfect way of remembering, but it helps. Okay, then you go to chapter 8. What happens in chapter 8, or who, what, where? Seventh seal is broken. Okay, so Jesus, yes, is breaking the seventh seal. Never forget who is doing this. So the seventh seal is broken. So we've had six of the 7 seals broken here. We have kind of some people groups talked about, and then we have the 7th seal broken. A little bit of interruption in the action, sort of, as it goes on. Okay, and as the 7th seal is broken, what happens?
Silence in heaven for half an hour.
Okay, now if we sat here for half an hour with no sound, that would be significant, wouldn't it? It would almost be deafening, as sometimes you'll hear silence being deafening. Remember, the fact is, what John has been seeing in heaven going on is constant worship. Songs being sung, sound going on, things being said. He has, and multitudes making these sounds, right? It's loud. Be like being in an arena at times and hearing singing. Have you ever been in a large convention and hearing God's praises sung in song with thousands of people at a time? You know, it might be 7,000 women singing at a Point of Grace concert, or no, that would be the best, a Women of Faith conference or something, and you're hearing all these women singing at the same time. Now think about hundreds of thousands, multitudes, myriads that you can't even count. And then all of a sudden, silence. What would that silence maybe indicate to you?
Something's going to happen.
This is big.
It's like the silence before a hurricane.
Yeah.
The
Calm before the storm. That's a good way of putting it. That silence is like this seal is broken and there's silence. From people, creatures, beings that know what's going on. We don't. We're still going, why? For half an hour, or is it about half an hour? To give us a time frame. That it's not just a momentary silence. It's for the 7th seal is broken. Do you think the 7th seal is significant? Oh yeah. Something we need to look at. Okay. And then it said he saw 7 angels who stood before the throne of God, and 7 trumpets were given to them, And another angel came, so this is beyond the 7. Another angel came and stood at the altar, holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him, that he might add it. I love this. Add it to the prayer of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. So the prayers of the saints are in that altar before the throne. And remember, it's an incense altar. If you go back and you look at the temple or tabernacle and how God laid it out, remembering that Moses and later David was giving the blueprint for how to lay things out, it was the altar of incense that was on this side of the curtain, and on the other side of the curtain was the mercy seat on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And the mercy seat represented what? The throne of God. Right. So the pattern for the tabernacle and temple given here for what was going to be seen here on earth was patterned after what was in the heavens. So every time those priests went in, which the people didn't, but the priests went in and they put the incense there, and then they took it, the high priest took it in once a year. That was what he took in with him when, besides the blood, he took the incense censer in with him and waved it before him so that the smoke wafted over the throne of God. That's the picture you have here. And what is that smoke? Our prayers. That's where your prayer goes. Yeah. I know, it's amazing. I have chills, right? It's amazing, isn't it? And we get to see that right here in chapter 8. And then it says, he took the censer and filled it with fire. He did some other things. But then the rest of the chapter is about what?
Trumpet sound.
Okay, so you have the 7th seal broken. And as part of the 7th seal broken, you have 7 angels with trumpets, right? With 7, each has a trumpet. And then you have 4 of those trumpets sound. So that's a lot of information, but I feel like it's important for me to be able to glance at that chart or wherever and say that's what this whole chapter is about. It has. Plus, as I've got it marked on your observation worksheet or in my Bible, I've got those trumpets marked. So I can just glance down and be able to tell you that I've got 4 trumpets in chapter 8 sounding. Okay? So we go to chapter 9. What's happening in chapter 9?
5th and 6th.
So 5th and 6th. So first we have the 5th trumpet. Now remember, this is an angel sounding this trumpet, but it's the 5th trumpet sounding, right? And then there's another thing talked about. At the end of the 5th trumpet sounding, in verse 12, what does it say?
First woe.
The first woe is past. Okay? So at the end of the 5th trumpet, you have the first woe is past. And then what happens after that?
Second woe is coming.
Second woe is coming. Okay.
The 6th angel.
Right. And then you have the 6th trumpet. Does the 6th trumpet sound? Am I right about that? Yes.
Yes.
6th trumpet sounds. Okay. So as you look at that, this again is fairly surface, but I want you to begin to think. If you have the 5th, you have the succession of these trumpets. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you have 5. Before you have 6, you have the statement, the first woe is past. What would you connect the first woe to then? The 5th trumpet.
Yeah, 5th trumpet.
Does that make
What was
sense?
your question? I'm sorry.
Okay. You have a succession of trumpets sounding. You have the giving of the trumpets, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 trumpet sound, right? Out of 7, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you have a 5th trumpet sound. Before the 6th trumpet sound, you have the statement, first woe is past. So what would you connect the first woe to? The 5th trumpet. And then it also says the second woe is coming, and what happens? The 6th trumpet sound. So you would connect the second woe, possibly, to the 6th trumpet, right? You're beginning to think that, right? So you have 7 trumpets, and now we're talking about 3 woes. Are the 3 woes, well, I guess I've gotten a little ahead of you, but you've looked at chapter 10. Are the 3 woes the same thing as, or are they something different? Because we now have 7 seals and 7 trumpets. What were you saying?
I said that woes are different.
Woes are different, or are they connected to?
Well, they're connected to, but they are not the trumpet.
Okay, they're not necessarily the trumpet sounding, but they're still connected to the 5th trumpet sounding, if that makes sense. Because they're spoken of separately, okay? But basically, one way to look at it is the first 4 trumpets aren't woes. If I said woe to you, is that a good thing?
With the first 4 trumpets sound at the same time, do they not?
One after another.
Oh, one after another, okay.
Right, they are in the same chapter.
Right,
Right.
but in succession, I mean, nothing happening after the sound of each one.
There is something happening. If you look in chapter 8, first trumpet, it says hail and fire mixed with blood.
Oh, okay,
So there's stuff that happens as it's not just a sound, there's stuff,
okay.
okay? It's so theologically correct, right? There's stuff. Okay, and we're not going to settle every one of these issues. I want you to be thinking and we're going to start charting this stuff in future lessons, and I think you're going to see how it fits better. But I just want you to begin to think and not get too confused by, hey Barbara. Okay, so as the 6th trumpet sounds, we have been told there is a second woe coming before the 6th trumpet sounds. So we can't say for sure yet that that's the 6th trumpet. The 6th trumpet has sound. You can begin to think that anything that happens after this trumpet sounds is part of what we call the 6th trumpet. Okay, so there's things that you're told about in chapter 9 going forward, right? 1/3 of mankind was killed by plagues, etc. Okay, so when you do your charts, you'll list those things. All right. Then in chapter 10, we have an interesting little thing going on here. What do you see in chapter 10? A strong angel. Okay. You've got a lot of angels coming and going. You know, don't be too concerned about keeping up with all of them unless they're tied to something specific. Just know God's got a bunch of them. And there's a lot of them. He can do whatever he wants to with them, and they do exactly what he tells them to do. But John sees another strong angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and the rainbow was upon his head, and his face was like a little sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book, which was open. And he placed his right foot on the sea and his left on the land. You'll have fun as you draw this one out.
Yeah.
Okay. And he placed his right foot on the sea and his left on the land. And then it says, and he cried out with a loud voice, as when a lion roars. And when he cried out, 7 peals of thunder uttered their voices. And when the 7 peals of thunder had spoken, in other words, finished, it said, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up the things with which the 7 peals of thunder have spoken, and do not write them. John's told to write a bunch of stuff, but not that. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Paul was taken to the 3rd heaven, or Paul says, I know a man, and was taken to the 3rd heaven, and then he was told, don't write about it. So always keep in mind that when you start hearing about these people in these books and these people that are appearing on TV shows talking about going to heaven and telling about it later, maybe they were supposed not to. Maybe they didn't have that experience. Who knows? Just question it. Because Paul, who wrote a bunch of stuff, wasn't told to write that. And then it says, and the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land, same angel, lifted up his right hand to heaven. And he swore by him who lives forever, who created heaven and the things in it, and the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it, that there shall be a delay no longer. Okay? Now, notice he's swearing by he who lives forever. Remember, we're told in Romans that we're not to worship the creatures, we're not to worship the sun, moon, and stars. And Paul tells us we're not to swear by the temple. We're not to swear by the sun or moon or stars. This angel gives us a picture of swearing by he who, meaning the Father, made it all happen. You know, he who lives forever, or God, all parts, the 3. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, okay, so if it's the days of the voice of the 7th angel and we're in the 7 trumpets, who do you think he's talking about? Or 7th trumpet, or when the angel that's going to blow the 7th trumpet, possibly, okay? It says, in the days, this is a time phrase, in the days of the voice of the seventh trumpet, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished. That is a significant time phrase. And as he preached to his servants, the prophets. Okay, not the angel preached, but as God preached to his servants, the prophets. And the voice which I heard from heaven, I heard again speaking with me, saying, Go and take the book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the land. And I went to the angel, telling him to give me the little book. And he said to me, Take it and eat it, and it will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it'll be sweet as honey. So if you were eating something and it was bitter in your mouth, you probably would want to spit it out. But instead, this is sweet as honey in his mouth, but it's going to make his stomach bitter. Kind of gives you an idea of maybe the content of the book. Okay?
I saw that somewhere else. Where did we see
Yeah, Carolyn's saying, we saw that somewhere else. Where did
that?
we
It was
see
not,
that?
it was.
It's a prophet.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Starts with E. Ezekiel,
Ezekiel,
right.
yeah.
Similar, not
Yeah.
exact, but you'll go there.
The stomach, yeah, it made me think of that.
Yeah. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey, and when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And they said to me, You must prophesy again concerning many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. So his prophecy isn't finished. John's not done writing, right? So we call this a parenthetical thing going on. In other words, you've got all these events, things are happening, you've got all this stuff you're told is happening in the sixth trumpet, and then all of a sudden you have just a chapter about something. It is happening. John did experience this, but it's not necessarily part of the events of the sixth trumpet. It's in there. We've got a little bit of an interruption. So how would you title this chapter? Here are some of the main characters.
Heaven help us all.
Yeah. That's an example of what this chapter title should be, but you're right. Okay, so you have a strong angel with a little book. And John eats it. You can write a lot of things, but those are the main parts to this chapter that would, if you read that, remind you about this chapter. That's your goal, and it all is a part of the revelation that John has been given.
And then John must prophesy.
And John must continue prophesying, right. But there's a significant time phrase in here about the mystery of God. It is finished in the days of the seventh trump angel when he is about to sound. You're going to come back to that into the future, so just remember. So as we go into chapter 11, what are we seeing here?
Two witnesses.
We got two witnesses. You've probably heard of the two witnesses before, too. There's two witnesses. And what else is significant?
Measuring rod.
Okay, they were given a measuring rod, and they're told to measure what? John is given a measuring rod, I think. Yeah, rod like a staff.
The temple of God.
The temple of God, right. And the altar, and those who worship in it. And then it says, leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and don't measure it, because it's been given to the nations, and they'll trample it underfoot for 42 months. Significant time phrase.
3.5 years.
Yeah, 42 months equates to 3.5 years, right. And then it says, I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days. Another time phrase, which also equates to 3.5 years. Okay?
Keep coming back.
I know, keep coming back to that. If you use a 360-day year, because remember when we did Daniel, the Jewish calendar had a 360-day year. So if you take 1,260 days and you divide that by 360, you come up with 3.5. Just to give you an idea, but we'll look at this further. There are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth, and we will look at this more detailed when we get to these chapters. And if anyone just desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone would desire to harm them in this manner, he must be killed. So it goes on to talk about these two witnesses and what they're doing and what power they have and what happens as a result at the end of their time. Okay, so we have the two witnesses. You were going to say something?
I was going to say the second one was passed too.
Now we've got the second woe is passed. Okay, so we've got the two witnesses, and the second woe is passed. Okay, so we saw the second woe mentioned when? Very good, because you can at a glance see it, right? Okay, so this is the second woe that we're talking about here, and it was mentioned just prior to the sixth trumpet sounding. We've already said there seems to be a connection between the first woe and the fifth trumpet. Now you've got a stronger connection between the second woe and the sixth trumpet. In other words, this trumpet sounds, and when that trumpet is ending, they tell you that woe is past. So it looks like what happened during that time was the woe. It seems to be. Okay? So the second woe is past. Therefore, what would you expect to be happening next? The seventh trumpet. And isn't that what we see? Okay? Seventh trumpet sounds. Okay. So second woe is past, and then you have the seventh trumpet beginning. Okay. Since you were told prior to these, I think you were told at the end of chapter 8, which was the end of the 4 trumpets being sounded, it says, woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels who were about to sound. Now, how many times did it say woe? Woe, woe, woe. 3 woes. Then they start talking about the 5th trumpet, first woe is past. 6th trumpet, second woe is past. So what do you think is going to happen with the 7th trumpet? Third woe is it's going to be attached to it. Possibly. We'll see it, but I just want to put that idea in there especially as we go forward. Okay, but we also heard that when the 7th angel was about to sound, we saw this in chapter 10, verse 7, the mystery of God is finished. Okay, so now we see the 7th angel sounding. So remember, what you're going to see in the 7th trumpet is going to be tied to the mystery of God is finished. Okay? These are significant time phrases. Things that, as you mark time phrases, and I just underline them in green and put my green clock, okay, when I'm looking at time phrases. Okay? And a lot of times I'll write it out in the margin too so I can glance down and see it, as it ties in. These things are going to be important. Maybe not even in this part, although it's going to be somewhat, but as we get in parts 3 and 4 and we start really tying events together strongly, these things are going to be important. And I don't want to go, we're going to look at these more clearly, but okay. But when it says the 2 witnesses went up to heaven, it says, in that hour there was a great earthquake and 1/10 of the city fell. Verse 13 of chapter 11, sorry. And the 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest that were terrified gave glory to the God of heaven. And then it says the second woe is past. That's all part of the 6th trumpet. Even though we had that interruption, in a sense, in chapter 10, even though that could be, you could say that was part of the 6th trumpet maybe, but it seems to be its own little thing going on. You have the 6th trumpet starting, now you've got the end of the 6th trumpet, so these events are all part of your 6th trumpet. Okay? Then the 7th trumpet sounds. Okay. To try to give you something to tie chapter 11, there's 1 and 1, 2 witnesses. I tried. I had visual things that helped me. Okay, so chapter 11, and then starting next week, you're going to look at chapters 12 through 22. You're going to do a very similar process where we're going to look at these chapters very lightly, but you're just going to start getting some idea. You're not finishing, you're not understanding everything yet. And trust me, you really won't understand most everything until you get to part 4 of Revelation, so just hang in there. But you're going to understand a lot. This is exciting to me, that we're on the cusp, we're on the beginning, and we're able to put these things down.
It really makes you think about the things that are happening today.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And in relations to all this.
Right. And it's a great exercise, Sandy, to think about what's going on today as we read through this. The events don't necessarily fit perfectly. Like, you're not going to sit here and go, oh, I just heard a trumpet sound, But I told you about my time out when I was really quiet and I'm reading my Bible because, I'm so wonderful and holy and all that.
You have all these warnings.
Yes.
Yeah, harbingers.
Yes, harbingers, as some people would call them, warnings. We do have them. And we are told by Paul to look up because our redemption is nigh. And we like to get that chin up.
Yeah, that helps.
Make sure your camera is up there. Yeah, look up, for your redemption is nigh. We are to be looking up. And part of that is, don't be downcast. Although our circumstances sometimes cause us, and really physically we react, right? We lower our heads, literally. I was just reading the Psalm where David talks about he dissolves his couch in tears. David, a man after God's own heart, but he had a lot of enemies. Yes, Sandy?
But this thing that happened in Paris yesterday.
Yes.
And they, at the end, they praised, they did it in the name of their God.
Yes.
And I sat there and said,
It's not our God, right? And yeah, the Paris attack, I kept getting little bits and pieces. I still don't know all of it, but there was apparently a satire magazine that's known for promoting freedom of speech, and it was attacked yesterday by jihadists. And so many, I forgot how many people were killed. 12. But there was a man on the news this morning, Fox News, and he was saying, knowing this better than I do, he was saying that France has consistently set themselves up, and he knew when it started, by negotiating or conceding to terrorists. And so what happens is they hold people hostage because it's going to fund their activities. And France has already started this long ago. So if they do this again, you cannot, this is an extremely radical group. Aren't you glad there's such a peaceful religion?
Yeah.
That is definitely sarcasm.
That is the lie that's out there.
Yes, the lie that's out there, absolutely. So yes, does that fit what we just read today?
No.
Exactly, no. The events of yesterday aren't written right here, no. But you see that trending, you see, and I've said this before, but I remember the moment when somebody, and we happened to be at Precept down in Chattanooga, said a term that's not a biblical term, but it was the days of Islam. And I just stopped and I thought how it fits. The headings, you know, you're going to see that, how it fits. Their activities, the way they do things. And there is a term called the days of the Gentiles, and Islam would be part of the Gentiles, but to have that specific idea of, and Europe, France included, is really overrun with Islam. They've kind of allowed it and tolerated it to the extent, I don't know that they shouldn't. Yeah, but and somebody, I remember when the kids and I were doing history with homeschool, which thank goodness I went through some of that with my kids because I don't remember it from when I was in school. But
Not have been taught it.
probably weren't taught it, but we studied a portion of history and probably like Middle Ages maybe, when Muhammad, you know, and what it was always, or the beginning of Islam was about violence and killing. It was really, really bad. But so whether or not the individual Muslim today is like that is a different issue. I will give that. But it started out with such violence. But one of the statements that was made later is they used to try to conquer people through war. Now all they do is just move in, marry, have children, grow in numbers, and take over from within. And they will rise up suddenly and kill off everybody. They've done it over and over and over again. So yesterday wasn't that, but yesterday was an attack on.
Yesterday was a warning.
Yeah,
Another
it should be a warning for us.
Yeah.
But yesterday was an attack on the ability to speak freely. That's exactly what it was. If they cave, then they will no longer ever be able to speak freely. So and I feel like our free press here in America has given that up, is giving that up over and over again to the point where we are silenced. We don't have to be, but they're trying to silence us unless we speak the way they want us to. And they're wanting to be a free press, but what they're not seeing is as they continue to give that up and as they continue to force people to conform, then they're eventually somebody, the powers that be are going to walk in and say, press, this is what you're going to say. They're already doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and and you look at Hitler's Germany and you see that, you know, you see why won't they look back, you know, to what would it be now, 50 something years?
Yeah.
To the 70 years, because it's 40s and earlier, right? I'm bad with history, but yeah, I was thinking 46 yesterday, and so it would be in the 40s, and so do the math right, and you get to 70 plus years since Hitler's Germany, when apparently we didn't learn lessons. We fought it, but we didn't learn
We're
lessons.
trying to tell us that that didn't really happen, so.
Yes. Many are saying it's all a myth, right, just like man walking on the moon. But anyway, it's amazing. Okay, so you have, is there anything that was significant that you want to point out from this week that, spoke to you? Because remember, as you're writing out your chapter titles and whatever, there may be something extremely significant that God spoke to you on in that chapter, conviction or just interest or anything like that. That may not be your chapter title. Write it down somewhere. This is what God is speaking to you. Keep yourself a journal. Write it in your margin of your Bible or your observation worksheet. If you have a question in your lesson, find a place or have a separate sheet of paper where you have a question that you want to have answered over time or want to ask in class. Because I'm telling you, you're going to come in here and you're going to forget it. I do it too. I earlier was going, wasn't there something else I was going to say? There's so much, but anyway, and encourage. I'm glad those that were able to come out. We have a good group. Several are not here for known reasons, and keeping each other in prayer for spiritual encouragement, but also for physical health and healing, and as it's needed, and we'll continue to lift each other up. This is going to be a very that you're going to be hit with warfare like you've probably never been hit before. And if we know that and bring it to the forefront of our knowledge, then when it happens, you're actually going to kind of laugh and giggle a little bit and go, I'm worthy. Like John and Peter left and said, praising God, saying I was found worthy to be persecuted. I don't usually handle it that way. I usually react and then later get around to it, but recognize now you're going to be attacked. This is the main thing, other than your salvation, that Satan does not want you to get a handle on. Okay, so be aware of that, and be aware of it for everybody. Okay, and so we'll keep each other in prayer. It'll be an exciting time. Okay, anything else? All right, we'll pray and we'll get our food and watch the video. And remember that I do have a set of CDs if you have to miss and want to listen, or if you want to borrow the DVDs at times. Like Sandy knows she's leaving early. Patty knows she's going to be missing a lot. They are available. There's another method that you can use on your own, and that is to go through the Precept website and you can download the MP3 versions if you can listen to the MP3. But you basically are going to pay for a whole set of these. So if I've got them, you're welcome to borrow them. Obviously, I can't give you the DVD before we watch it, but they're available. And certainly, if you want to rewatch something or share it with somebody else, they're available. We just sign them out, as you know.
Peggy?
Yes.
I will bring Part 1's DVDs to you tomorrow at the clothes shop.
I won't be at the clothes shop.
Oh, you won't be?
Yeah. But that's okay. Nobody's asking for them right now. You can bring them next week if you want. And that usually is okay. We do ask, that just reminds, not that anybody's asking about these, but if you do borrow the DVD, try to get it back at least by the next week, because somebody else maybe, there is only one. Some people don't mind listening to the CDs while they're in the car at the time they can. Others want to watch the video, and I don't blame them. I like watching the video. It helps keep my attention. So, but we do have them here, and then they're available to be loaned. This hopefully is going to work for the discussion. If you happen to miss a discussion, we'll try to get the YouTube thing going, and maybe help and just understand it's limited. Nobody's operating a camera. I'm not mic'd, so I'm trying to say back to it what y'all are saying, and I'm trying to lift my chin. We've already gone over that. Okay, we'll pray and then we'll have our meal. Praise you, Father, for who you are, for bringing us into this study, for the excitement that I'm feeling right now as this truth is going to be unveiled as you have intended. You have given it through this process, through John, to us ultimately now in this moment. And there's a reason. We're to know this for a reason, for our own edification and for us to share with others possibly. We ask all the time that you would reveal to us what we're supposed to say. Be aware of the warfare that's coming. Thank you, Father, that in advance you will be with us always, even into the end of the age. And therefore we're not alone, but we have each other too. We need to be reminded to lift each other up about the warfare that's coming, and encourage those who miss, for good reasons even, as they come back. Thank you for technology that can help us through Kay's videos, through even this discussion that can be shared for those who might have to miss. We thank you for that. Just ask Father again that you just guide our discussions, be right here with us. Bless the food that's been brought, give us great fellowship and bonding together, and thank you for the safety you've given us so far and the warmth of our home and going back in our warm cars to our warm homes again. We just thank you for it all and ask for it all in Jesus' precious name and for his sake as well. Amen.